All right. I think we got two. They're kind of updates and kind of questions. Somebody's writing in. In this case, it's Jane actually on both of them, and saying, "What do you think of this paper?" And so, yeah, all right. It's a question and an update. So let's do it. First one is going to be a paper called, and I have to pull it out from under. Here we go. Predicting infectious SARS-CoV-2 from diagnostic samples. So, all right, that sounds useful. And it's by a whole bunch of people that all seem to be based in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, in Canada. So, hello, yeah, my Winnipeg, yeah, quite a movie. Not like the real Winnipeg. All right. So, this is the idea. So the way they do the test, so when they put that swab up your nose, they're doing a thing called a quantitative reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, or a QRT-PCR. Yeah, or some people just shorten that to RT-PCR, or some people, I don't know, make it weird and call it real-time PCR. It's like it happens in real time, which I've always kind of been annoyed by that name. I don't know. Yeah, as opposed to the fake time PCRs that other people do. Um, and the idea is that it's actually, no, let's not go into all the technical details, but there's a little thing that happens. So every time we make a copy successfully, there's a little sort of detector in the middle. And as you're making a copy, you're going to free up one thing from the detector, and it's going to make a little flashing light. A little fluorescent molecule is going to appear. Now, the reason it wasn't fluorescent before is because the two ends of the detector, one thing basically eats the fluorescence and the other thing produces the fluorescence. As long as they're together, you don't see any signal. But as soon as you come in and knock one of the two off, then all of a sudden you get great signal, and now you can read it out. Yeah, because they still work as long as they're a little bit farther apart, but when they're right close together, they don't work very well. So on this test, what you get is not necessarily it's not really a positive or negative. That is how doctors would often report it. But what you actually get is a thing called a cycle time. And so they call it a CT in this one because they're too cool for school. Yeah. And so cycle time means there's a while where you have so little that's going on. So you're making like one copy to two, two copies to four, four copies to eight, like that. And the detector inside the machine can only start picking that stuff up once there's a lot of copies. And so it's going to look like you have no copies, no copies, no copies. And then all of a sudden you'll get enough that the detector is able to see them. It's like bright enough that it can see. And then all of a sudden it'll start going up, 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 up. And then boom, you'll reach a plateau and it'll level off at the top. And so the point at which you've started to go up, that is effectively your cycle time. So was it on cycle? You repeat the same part of the test over and over again. Do it about 40 times usually. And so if you have something that starts to rise on cycle 5, then boy, you must have had a lot of it there at the beginning. And if it's cycle 10, well, you didn't have as much. And so it's about twofold difference per cycle. So if you got a cycle 8 versus a cycle 9, you got about twice as much stuff in the cycle 8, CT8 sample. If I remember right, that's the idea. So, yeah. So what are they saying? They're saying that if you have samples from patients, so they tried to do two things. They did the regular old RT-PCR or QRT-PCR test, the nose swab, let's look for little pieces of the virus test. And they also did a nice thing, which is they took that sample and put it onto Vero cells. Vero cells are from it's an African green monkey, Cercopithecus aethiops, I think. And that doesn't really matter, but they're cells that are really good at growing SARS coronavirus and SARS coronavirus 2 and a bunch of other viruses. They're just really good cells for growing viruses of all sorts. Yeah, how wonderful. You can grow the chicken coronavirus in them, for example. And the chicken coronavirus is kind of fussy, but yeah, not when it comes to these cells. They say, come on in. And so they're then correlating, like, okay, I got a cycle time of 15 for this. Did it grow? Yes. I got a cycle time of 30 for this one. Did it grow? No. And they come to the conclusion that if you have a cycle time of less than 24, so 23 and under, then yeah, chances are you're going to be able to detect the virus. You can actually culture the virus from there. And if you have cycle times over that, then generally they're not able to start a virus culture. Now, the potential problem, pitfall, with this approach is that Vero cells, although they're pretty good at growing most everything, are not perfect at growing SARS. So, for example, the mouse coronavirus in mouse cells, the right mouse cells, you can get about 1 out of 10 of those viruses in to the cell. With SARS coronavirus 1, from studies that I did, but they got kind of buried in the supplementary information on a paper, it's about 300 to 1 in Vero cells. SARS is not necessarily a worse virus than that. It's just that Vero cells are not great at picking up SARS and getting it in. They're good enough, they're better than most of the alternatives, but they're still not ideal. What's ideal is, of course, the human lung and probably also the bat lung and maybe the pangolin lung. Those are excellent. And so, what they are saying at the end of this paper, which is the kind of dangerous part, is that, yeah, if you have a person and their test is 20, 24 cycle time or higher, then the likelihood that they transmit the virus may be low, which if you're breathing out less virus, the likelihood of transmitting the virus is lower. Yeah, okay. But they're also saying this information can be used to inform public health policy. In other words, if your cycle time is 24, it's okay. You're positive, but just go out in the world and do whatever. That's the dangerous part, I think, because there's a non-zero chance that that works, and because they're using Vero cells, which may be a little less sensitive than human lung cells. And so you may give a false sense of reassurance, when you don't want to. So I like the correlation. I like that they did this test. I would, yeah, snip off the conclusion part, or just modify it heavily if I was one of the reviewers on this, which I was not. Yeah. So there we go. That's our first Dr. Ben update of the day. Thank you very much.